Hi, everyone. I'd like to welcome you to this um, training of to build a smart online marketing strategy with Melissa Forziat. I'm with the Arkansas Small Business and Technology Development Center. We work to help support small businesses in Northwest Arkansas, and ASBTDC also has offices around the state. So if you're in the Northwest Arkansas area, need help with your business idea or with your small business challenges, growth, whatever you might need to meet with one of our consultants, then go to our website at sbtdc.uark.edu and schedule a consultation. All of our services are at no cost to our clients. We're grant funded through the SBA, the University of Arkansas, and the Walton Family Foundation, and happy to help you. So, I'm going to go ahead and turn this over to Melissa Forziat, and she will tell you a little bit about herself and proceed with the training. Thanks for joining us.
Yeah,
Melissa?
huge thank you for that, Julie. And actually, before I say anything, a huge thank you to the ASBTDC, to Julie, to Mary Beth, to everybody who makes these trainings happen. I understand that it is a rather frigid day where you all are. I'm so happy that you were able to find your way online and find your way to this session. And hopefully, for the next hour and a half, we can all distract each other from the cold and learn a little bit along the way. So thank you for being here and for taking the time to think about your marketing. So for those of you who have heard me speak before, welcome back. I'm so glad to have you back at a training. And for those who haven't, I'll introduce myself briefly and just say, I started out in my career doing major international sport events. So I was working with organizations like the Olympic Winter Games and Rugby World Cup. I worked with the US Olympic Committee. So I started out working with these huge, massive brands that are operating at a giant scope. And then about a dozen years ago, maybe more, at this point, I started my own business and I began working mostly with small businesses. So for me, it really became a question of how do you take those great principles of marketing that I learned at that huge scale. How do you make it work though for businesses that look like yours or mine that don't have anywhere near those resources, and yet we still have to get it done? So for me, marketing is all about how can you be realistic and practical with your resources while getting your message out, which means when I approach a topic like online marketing, which is a topic where a lot of people want to focus on advertising dollars and throwing money around. You may or may not have that money to throw around. So I want to look at this from a standpoint of, for the most part, organic strategies and how you can be smart in building a brand and a reputation and generating traffic and getting it to go where you want it to go. And if you do have money to throw into that, that's great. But if you don't, you can still absolutely listen to all of the ideas that I'll be presenting to you and hopefully implement some of them. So I wanted to set that up because some of my approaches here may sound a little different than you might hear from other marketers. And that's why, because I'm really looking at this from a resource standpoint first and from a realism standpoint first. So we'll talk about how to build a smart online marketing strategy today. And a few quick housekeeping items before we jump in. Yes, everybody is on mute for this presentation, but I still encourage you to minimize distractions on your end if you can. So if there's anything happening on your end that's taking focus away for you, this is a great time to minimize that or shut that down. That could be silencing your phone or shutting off a messaging device. For me, the more you're able to think about your business in the context of this material, the more you're going to get from this presentation. And so Julie also mentioned earlier that I've shared a link with her that she'll be able to share out with all of you at the end of this. That link actually includes the full slide deck. It includes any links that I share, any additional resources or blogs that I share as we go through the presentation today. The only thing it doesn't include is the recording, which Julie is generating right now. So she'll be sharing all of that separately. There will be a link to that landing page I've created at the very end of this presentation. So just know, if you feel like you're rushing to take notes, chances are you can go back and actually rewatch or recapture some of that information later. So try to, take a deep breath and absorb what you can in the moment. In terms of questions, this one will work a little bit differently than my presentations usually do if you've been to any before. So we will have time for questions at the end. But this one also has a couple additional breaks in the middle for questions because I think the material necessitates that. So when we get to those moments, feel free to put any questions that you have into the chat and we can find them there. I encourage you right now to go into the chat and make sure your chat is set to everyone, not just to hosts and panelists, because there will also be times that I ask you questions, and that's a great opportunity for you to put your thoughts into the chat. And if we're all set to everyone, we can see what's happening and we can see any trends or anything else that's forming. So since I've just introduced myself, how about let's have everybody go into the chat and just introduce themselves with everyone being the group that you're directing it to. So, let us know your business name, maybe a sentence about what you do. And that'll be a great way to just test the chat and introduce yourselves to each other because, hey, we're all here. You never know if there's another business out there that you could partner with in some way or collaborate with. So those are some of the quick housekeeping items that I wanted to run through on this before we jump in. And let me set up what we're going to talk about today. So before we dive into any specifics, the first thing we're going to do is talk a little bit about some core strategy because you have to know what I'm trying to accomplish with these tactical approaches in order to understand if that's a strategy you want to take on. So we'll talk core strategy first, and then we're going to look at 5 different tools that you can potentially use with online marketing. We're going to look at websites and blogs, then we'll break for questions. Then we'll look at social media and we'll break it for questions again after that. And then we'll finish up with newsletters and lead magnets and have those final questions at the end. So that's what you can expect today in terms of the breakdown. When it comes to online marketing, you could probably talk about other tactical options as well. We have an hour and a half. We're going to look at these 5 today, and we're going to talk about how they integrate with each other. And I love seeing everybody introducing themselves in the chat. So just to set this up for you, look, we all have things to learn with online marketing, with any type of marketing, with our businesses in general. And I wanted to be transparent about why this type of presentation is so important to me. I think about as a marketer, I've really had a knowledge of marketing throughout the beginning of my business and have really tried to apply that to my own business growth. And even I have had learning curves along the way. So when I first started doing online marketing, I started by really trying to grow my social media. At the time, Facebook was really taking off. So I was trying to grow my Facebook page and did. I grew up to a nice, healthy number. I was very happy with it. But I didn't yet have my lead magnet, which is the ebook that you can sign up for on my website. And had I just reversed the order of those things, I would have had a lot more people who were following me on Facebook eventually sign up for my newsletter list because they would have had something to sign up for. And so not having done the ebook first or having completed it first was a real missed opportunity for me that I think about still. I was moving as quickly as I could, but sometimes, if you can just get that one step done now before you do the other things, it makes a big difference in your business. So I give you this visual representation of that. Me at the Vancouver, actually, this is the Whistler Olympic store getting run over by a bobsleigh by my friend. That's a little bit what it felt like at first because you're running as hard as you can with online marketing, but sometimes you have to think smarter, not or work smarter, not harder. And that was definitely one of those cases. So we're going to talk about ways that you can work smarter today. Now, here's some of the things we will talk about because I also want to be clear about what we won't talk about. So let's start with what we will talk about. First, we're going to approach this from the standpoint of building an online presence that has staying power. Look, if you're trying to figure out how to go viral overnight, I don't know how to tell you how to do that. I can give you some ideas on, content that might work for you, but going viral is not something that we can really plan for. There's a lot of content out there. What you want to think about is how can you find content that's going to be discoverable for a long time? How can you build a presence that's going to build relationships that last a long time? Because you don't want to be in business for one night. You want to be in business for a long time. And so the online presence that you're building does need to match that accordingly. Now, we'll also talk about how to build community online. There is community to be had online. It's just a matter of how you go about tapping into it, looking for it, finding it, generating it. And then lastly, we'll talk about how to build an organic plan that's viable with a low budget. I'm going to assume that we don't have a ton of budget for any marketing or online marketing today. If you do have some, I'll give you an option of where you might want to think about spending that money first. And you can certainly enhance any ideas that we talk about with the budget that you have. But I want to make sure that everybody here, no matter what their budget is able to come away with some ideas that can be really functional for you. So just to put a finer point on that, here's what we're not talking about today. Boom. Paid advertising in its many forms. Now, I will say SEO, I will mention the concept of it a couple times today, but we will not be talking strategy about it. But things like pixels and retargeting and geo-targeting and pay-per-click, all of the things that are on this screen here, ad budgets, lookalike audiences, boosting, they're great things to talk about. They deserve their own entire presentation about them. But for me, the way I think about this, and I'm going to give you a visual for it. If you were thirsty and you wanted to drink some water to quench your thirst, you went over and you went to the tap and you got some water. Would you bring a glass with you or a sieve to pour the water into? So if you pour the water into a sieve, it's got all these holes around the side. The water is spilling out as quickly as you're pouring it in. It's spilling out the side. You can't really ever collect enough where you could drink it and quench your thirst. Whereas if you just poured that water into a glass, you could drink out of the glass and you're fine. For me, it's kind of the same thing with setting up your online marketing, right? Because if you are pouring money, if you're putting advertising dollars into a plan where you can't retain your leads, you can't get in front of them again, you haven't even captured those leads to begin with, you're spending money, but you're wasting a lot of it. What we want to talk about today is plugging up those holes, making sure that you have a way to capture those people, to stay in front of those people, to continue to reach them so that over time, those people that you're meeting through those advertising dollars or whatever method you're using to meet them, they actually could become customers down the road because they've been with you and built that relationship long enough and in an enduring way. So we're really focusing today on building out the organic part of the strategy. And whether you have money to spend on advertising or not, I still recommend using as many of these techniques as you can, because it's going to help you when you start meeting new contacts. You'll be able to put your system in place and make sure you're nurturing those leads. So again, those tools, they can expedite the reach of an already good online marketing plan. They are not, however, a replacement for a good marketing plan. Okay. So we're trying to minimize waste as much as we can. We can't afford to do that. We're small business owners, right? We can't afford to waste, but we can afford to be smart about our marketing. So let's talk about how to build a smart online marketing strategy. And the first thing that we need to do to get there, like I said, we're going to talk core strategy first, because we need to be on the same page about what we're trying to accomplish if we're going to go tactical after this. So in terms of core strategy, I mentioned this briefly earlier, but I'm really approaching this from a long-term standpoint. To me, online marketing is a long-term thing. Yeah, sometimes people, lightning strikes, they go viral on something, but even then, it's still better if you have a way to think about how to take that attention and make it a long-term thing for you. So we're going to be looking at how you can build that long-term strategy of it. And there are some tools that you can put in your tool belt for that. We're going to talk today about websites, blogs, social media, newsletters, and lead magnets. Now, I'm just curious. So as we go through those 5 different tools today, I'm going to mention one that I believe is not mandatory of the 5. And I'm curious, which one, before we even talk about any of these things, which one do you think I think isn't mandatory? So go ahead and put that in the chat and let's just see where we land with that. It's a great time to make sure that your chat is set to everyone so we can see. But so far, Jules saying website. Helen Lisa Bell saying maybe the newsletter. We've got a whole series of people. Oh my gosh, blogs are just, nobody likes blogs around here. Jenny is saying website, but then Aaron's coming in again with blogs. We just got like, I don't know, 6 or 7 blogs answers in a row. Blog is definitely a trend here. Patty's thinking website. Whitley's thinking website. So we've got a little bit of a mix so far. I think we've been hovering in the website, blog, newsletter category for all of this, but blogs have been indicted by us. We don't like blogs in this group. So it's great to sort of take the temperature of what we all think up front before I've even said anything about these tools. And who knows, Josh is giving me the depends answer. I like it. Depends on the nature of the business, really. Sure. So as we talk about these, we'll see if I validate you or change your mind at all. And all of it's just an opinion, but I have some logic behind my thought here. So when we get there, I will let you know which one I'm thinking and why. So those are some of the tools that we'll talk about today. Again, there are other tools that you can talk about for online marketing, but to me, these 5 are a really interesting core that you can use to sort of get leads to keep moving and stay within your network. Now, having said there might be one that I don't think is mandatory, I do believe every single one of those tools has a specific function in your overall strategy. They all have an assist in the goal, and it just depends on which direction the leads are moving in at any given time. So we'll talk about the function that all of those tools have, and you can ultimately decide and hopefully start building your own plan as we're going through this material today. Now, what are we trying to achieve? This is important to know what your overall objective is, because I would say there are 5 that we can aim for. And for each of you, you may have different things that are priorities for you. So the first objective you could be trying to reach is building your brand. And this is a really interesting thing that's evolved for us as business owners with online marketing growing over the past, decades. There was a time, the time of print being king. If you wanted to get news out about your business, if you wanted to get the story out about your business, there were only so many outlets to do that. If you took advertising off of the table and you just thought, okay, I want to be interviewed, or I want to have my business featured in a publication of some sort or a third-party outlet, there were very few ways to get that done. There were very few newspapers, magazines. There were only, radio, TV. There were certain earned media outlets, not a whole lot of them locally or nationally that you could tap into. And so what that meant was there were tons of businesses clamoring for that exposure. It was very, very hard to get those opportunities. But if you got the opportunity, all the eyes, all the ears were on those tools. So you could potentially get a lot of really beneficial exposure very quickly. But again, it was hard to get those opportunities. The other thing that we couldn't control with that model was the edit. If you do an interview, you know what you said, but what is the edit going to be? What quotes you gave for the article, but what's the story angle going to be when it's finally published? So, there's things that you can't control in that process. We've flipped that model with online marketing because once, the internet became something that people had a lot of access to, we could start controlling our own narrative. We could decide what we wanted to say about our own businesses. Yes, you still have the opportunity to have third parties feature you, but it's a lot more accessible to get your own message out, to decide exactly what you want to say today, tomorrow, next year. You could plan that out. The problem is that everybody can do that. So it's very saturated. Everywhere we go is very saturated. And so you have to hope that people will eventually consume that material you're putting out there. But I would say if we consider this model, a goal that you can have is, if somebody finds the content you've put out there, can they get to feel like they really understand and know your business quickly? Can you hook them in? Can you get them to feel like they trust you or want to hear more from you and stay with you longer? That's our job, right? We need to work really hard to make people want to stay with us once they've found us. So building the brand is absolutely one element that you can try to achieve. Now, the next one is building reputation. And this one is more important than you might think on the surface of it, because there are different personality types in the buying process, but actually all of them need some kind of validation, whether that be validation from other people, validation from facts and figures, whatever kind of validation they need some way to prove that they're making a good decision as a consumer before they make it. So we have to provide that for them. And this one's actually really tricky for a lot of business owners that I talk to, because so many of us want to be humble in our businesses. We don't want to toot our own horns. And that feels to some people like that's at odds with marketing, but it's really not. I want you to consider that there are ways to put information out that don't have to be arrogant. It's just about saying, no, here's what can make you trust this. People need that information. So if you have that, if you have anything that you can use to say, this is a feather in my cap, this is who else trusts me, you really want to lean into that as much as possible, because people require that in their process. The great thing about online marketing is that there's a lot of ways to put that information out there, and a lot of ways for you to control how it sounds when it goes out there. But it does need to get out there somehow. Now, creating community is a third objective. And, this one's interesting because in a way, the stronger, the more robust your community seems to be, it also does speak a little bit to your reputation, right? Because if we're thinking, oh, this person, everybody is following this person, or the right people are following this person or this business, it does make it seem like, oh, the business must be worth following. But community is also its own thing, right? We need to generate leads for our business. We need to have conversations. We need to generate buzz around our business. We need people referring our businesses. So you want to be proactive in building the community, the network around your business. And online, we absolutely can network, and we can be very particular about researching who we're networking with, even sometimes more so than in person. So you can be proactive in this area, and online marketing tools give you a lot of ways to do that. Okay, fourth goal, generating leads. Now, generating leads is really saying, can I get back in front of this specific person, right? You might do, let's say, a social media post and have a ton of people see it. Maybe you have 1,000 people see a post. But who are those 1,000 people, and how do you reach them again? Do you know for sure you reach those same people again? Generating leads is about saying, okay, I have the contact information for a specific individual, and I'm going to get in front of them again. Or they're standing in front of me right now. That's a lead too. So generating leads is a part of the process we really need to get to if we're going to sell something, because we sell one-on-one usually. So at some point, it needs to become I'm getting my voice, my message out to many. It needs to turn into a one-to-one conversation. And this is usually the part of the process where that happens. For me, generating leads is sort of a byproduct of doing those first three things well. So if you've built that brand, reputation, and community, but then you give people a way to connect with you directly, you now could have a lead from that. And then potentially this brings us to number 5, generating a sale. So if you've done all those first 4 things well, if you've built that brand, reputation, and community, somebody's sort of hovering in your sphere, and then they become a lead, now you're talking with them directly, they're in your sales pipeline, and potentially they can become a customer or a client or sign that contract. So generating sales is, in my opinion, done best with online marketing, as thinking of it as a byproduct of those first 4 things. Sometimes this whole process happens very quickly, especially if you have a product or service where there's a lot of urgency around it for your customers. Sometimes this process happens very slowly, and it takes time to nurture those leads. But regardless, people still kind of need to check all those boxes. So I will say, when we're online marketing, I know and you know, hey, we're business owners, we're here, we have this presence online because we want to sell stuff. But in some of the tools we'll talk about today more than others, you can't just go in for the sale all the time, which is very counterintuitive to us as small business owners who are there with that objective. Sometimes it's about the relationship building first. So we're going to talk a little bit about which tools are, better for sales messages, which ones kind of need that building those first three elements more. But if you ever had the experience of people just going to a platform where you were not planning to be sold to and just selling to you over and over again, I want you to think about what that feels like as a recipient. And I want you to think about if you want to have that going on in your own business. We'll get into that a little bit more as we get to the specific tools. So let's actually look at the first tool, which is the website. We're going to look at the website first, and I'm going to start by asking, what does a website do for you? Let me set this up. For every single one of our tools, I'm going to have a slide that's formatted like this with some bullet points. And in that landing page that I'm going to share the link for at the end of this presentation, I've actually compiled just those 5 slides so that you have a quick reference. This is a quick way of saying, what do these tools do for you and what function do they play in your strategy? And then from there, you can, really think about how you're going to use them. So this will be a quick reference, and we're going to go into all these bullet points in each section. So specifically with the website, what can it do for you? Well, first of all, it can connect all of your marketing and your offerings. Also, it can show all of your content and all the assets for your business in one place. You get to tell the story about those things. It is a place where you can set your business apart and show what makes it different from your competitors. Also, it's a place where you can draw new audiences in through search engine traffic. And then lastly, we'll just say that it's a truth teller of marketing analytics. So let's get into the details here. If I could give you a goal for your website, I want you to think about it this way. Somebody gets to your website. Maybe they knew you, maybe they didn't. I want you to give the people in your target market a chance to really explore your business and your offerings and to get comfortable. I want them to know that they're your target market right by just being there. Like they get there and they say, this is the website I needed today. And then to start learning how to trust you as quickly as possible by seeing all the content that you've put there. Now, when we think about how you get that done, structure is an important part of that process. So I'm going to give you another visual to think about here. Your website is a place where everything connects, where all of the things you want to tell your audience about, they can all be there. So when you think about that, if every tool that we're talking about today has a function, let's think of it like trains, like a train system. Now, there are some trains that are maybe more commuter rails or local rails where they're just sort of going back and forth on a line, maybe into the suburbs from, and then into the city, whatever city you're looking at. They just do this back and forth process. You don't have as many options of where you can go when you're on a commuter rail, but it can get you to, those smaller details. It can get you, to the local area that you want to be in. And then it can get you into potentially a central hub. Now, a central hub, a lot of times we're seeing those in bigger cities. You're seeing bigger stations where there are many platforms that connect. So if you want more options on where you can go, you're going to want to go to one of these central hubs where you can look at the board, you can see what your destination options are, you can get a ticket, you can get on the right platform, and you can get on the train. Your website is kind of like one of those central hubs. Your website is saying, okay, well, you found us. You can go here, you can do this, you can do this, you can do this. You want people to find the correct option for them with as little pain as possible, make it as easy as possible, and get to the right destination. So if you think about that, how would you structure your website to make it easy for people to navigate and find the right platform, the right path for them? Now, another thing to think about, if we take sort of the structural component away, from a brand standpoint, a lot of us have competitors. A lot of us have other businesses that are doing something similar. But your business is unique. Your business is unique because the people behind it are unique, but also maybe for other reasons as well. So your website should show people what makes your business different. Is it how you do business? Is it the people doing the business? Is it, is there some sort of value system that you have, or way you're going to talk to people that's different? You get to show those things. You don't even have to call out your competitors by name to do that. It's just by being who you are and showing people how your business operates that people will start to see the value of being on your website. So you want to make it as clear as possible for people to see that. And we'll talk a little bit more about a couple of the elements of that when we get to the social media section. Now, all of this being said, your website needs to speak to your target market. So you need to be thinking about, who is it that I'm trying to connect with? Who needs to show up on this website and know instantly that this is the right place for them? It may not be everybody on earth, right? It might be different groupings of people. And so that's something that we need to consider as business owners. And because I'm probably going to say target market a lot, let's put a quick definition around that. So these are the people who'd be most likely to be interested in your product, your service, your program, your idea, whatever it is you're selling. These are the people who would probably want to buy it. We need to connect with those people and let them know you found the right place. And the trick with that is most businesses have more than one target market. So rather than have you say, everybody's my target market, I want you to get specific about who your target markets are and structure your website to resonate with them. So for example, let's say you're a photographer and you photograph running events, you do pet photography, you do headshots. You should probably have a landing page for each of those things so that you can send people a link that feels specific to them, so that people can see in your menu, oh, no, I want the pet photography section. That is a way to structure it so that people feel like, oh, you actually do exactly what I need you to do. So think about who you're trying to reach through your business, who your target markets are. Make sure your website is really speaking to those people. And this is something that sounds really easy to say, but when you start diving into this for your own business, you may find that it raises a lot of questions. So when we get to the questions for it, feel free to ask. If you have specific ideas about your own business, it may help other people to listen to the logic. Now, I will say, obviously, I told you up front, we're not going to talk about SEO strategy a ton, but in this section in blogs, I'm just going to mention the idea of it. One of the great things about websites is it doesn't just have to be for people who already have heard about your business. It could be people discovering your business. Maybe they've typed a question into Google and Google spits out your website as a possible answer. So you really want to think about, on the back end of your website, do you have specific keywords that you're focused on for each page? Are you calling your target markets in? Let's say we have that photographer example. If you're known for photographing weddings, you want to make sure you're coming up in search results for weddings and wedding photography and things like that. And so maybe your whole website's about that, or maybe there's just a page about that. But you want to make sure that you're really thinking through, who am I calling in? Who am I trying to grab from search engines to get them to my page? We're going to look at this in more detail when we get to blogs, but this is something that a website can do for you. Last thing I want to point out here is that websites can be an interesting way to evaluate how your marketing is working, what's working the best. If you have something like an analytics tool, let's say Google Analytics for your website, you can actually use that to discover, what source are people coming to my website from? So let's say you've put ads out there from different sources. Well, you could see where did people click from? How did people get here? How long are they staying here? What are the best pages to look at? So I've actually created a blog about this topic, and any links that I put on screen are going to be in that last link at the end. So you don't need to write this link down, but you'll get access to that later. This one is simply about looking at some of the stats that I like from Google Analytics that may help you as you're trying to figure out which of your marketing is working. Now, I've said many times that we're really focusing on organic marketing here. If you do have budget, this is the first place I would invest it. If you can't tell from what I've said already, websites can do a ton of heavy lifting for your business. And we haven't even scratched the surface yet. There are some of these other tools that we're going to talk about later can tie into your website. So you want to make sure that, technically speaking, your website is functioning properly for you, that it's really doing that heavy lifting to attract leads and draw them in and get them to sign up for something so that you can start building your list of people that you're reaching out to. If you have one place where you have budget to spend and you're not an expert in web development, this is a place that I'd look for support to make sure that you're doing as many favors for your business as possible upfront. Now, chances are I've generated a lot of questions already, but let's look at blogs before we tackle those questions. So what can blogs do for your business? First of all, they can act as a magnet for your website. They can help keep your website fresh and updated. They can also trigger keywords and keyword phrases for search rankings. We'll look at SEO again there in a minute. And then it can help position your business with authority, reputation-wise, and tell the story of your business, brand-wise. So you can see how this really dials into a lot of those objectives. Now, I know a ton of you said you don't think blogs are mandatory, or you don't think I think blogs are mandatory. So let me see if I can make a case for it here. You know, I like visuals. So I like to think of blogs as a magnet for your website. How do you get people there? You give people a reason to visit your website. You give them something to think about. You talk about the value of a service that you provide. You talk about your brand. You give people something in your words in some way or in your tone, and it's giving them a reason to come to your website. And so that is absolutely an element that a blog can serve that a lot of other aspects of your website won't be able to serve. So another thing to consider with this is search engines. When we are consumers and we go to Google or any other search engine and we type in a question, we're looking for answers that are going to be relevant to us. And so Google wants to give people answers that are relevant to them. And the best way they can do that is, they have their own algorithms that, they're trying to decide, how do we determine what are relevant answers to give? Well, one element of this is making sure that a website is relatively recent. If you have a website on a topic and it hasn't been updated in 10 years, could it be as relevant an answer as something on that same topic that was updated yesterday? That's a very simplistic way to boil it down, but think about just logically. If search engines want to give relevant answers, updated current answers that satisfy the consumers, the people that are visiting their site, one of the elements of that is, are we putting fresh content there? Now, I want you to think about that in terms of a standard website. Okay, so there are certain pages of a website that we typically see on small businesses. So it's, you're going to see a home page, some sort of a main landing page. You might see an about page, about one owner or multiple owners or the whole team. You'll probably see some sort of a services or products page. You'll probably see a contact page. You might see more things beyond this, but these are some standard pages that tend to come up. Now, which of these things really get updated a lot, Once you've done a home page, an about page, a contact page, unless something significant has changed, usually those pages will end up staying the way they are for quite some time. Services or products. For some of us, we might have collections, seasonal collections even, there might be a change in your services or products, but for a lot of people, there isn't. So these standard pages, you might create them and set them and sort of forget them. How do you then have relevant stuff that's new and current, keeping your website fresh? Well, that's where a blog might come in. And the other great thing about your blog is if you consider that it's bringing new people in, you can ask yourself, well, exactly who am I trying to bring in and what's my strategy for that? So, for example, let's say you are really in the mood to bake some banana bread. You want to bake banana bread, but you don't have a recipe for it. So you go to a search engine and you type in best banana bread or banana bread recipe, and you get a whole bunch of options of links and websites that you can go to. You pick one, you make the banana bread, you like it. Great. That's cool. Well, you just discovered this whole website of maybe multiple recipes because you discovered one recipe, which let's say that's a blog. So now the next time, maybe you want to make blueberry buckle and you type blueberry buckle into your search engine and it gives you a bunch of results. But oh, there's the website that I made that banana bread from. Your eye is going to be quickly drawn to that because you've had a good experience already with that. Or maybe you didn't even go to Google search. Maybe you go back to that website and say, do they have a blueberry buckle recipe? You go to their search. So you've discovered an entire website because you discovered one piece of content. And not everybody thinks of recipes as blogs, but for me, that does fill the definition of a blog because you're creating a piece of content that people are discovering. So think about how that could work for your business. How would you talk about your services? How would you call in your target markets? What are some ways that you can break down what you do where you're answering questions that people may be asking to search engines directly? So you can start to see why I think of this as a magnet for your website. Now, the other element here, if we want to think about the other overall strategic objectives of our online marketing, this is a chance for you to wear your PR hat. So this is a chance for you to think about both brand, story and persona, and expertise. You can write content or you can create content from both of these standpoints. You can create content that is written or spoken or however it's coming across. It's delivered in a certain tone. It's delivering, values of your brand, or you can be talking about your experience and what makes your brand, your business special or award-winning or whatever. So there are some different ways you can take these pieces, and it's just about really thinking about how you want to lean it. Now, I want to address two very common concerns before I take questions here. A lot of people say, I hate to write. I absolutely hate to write. I don't like the feeling of having a blinking cursor effect and not knowing what to say. Blogs don't have to be articles. Blogs could be videos. Blogs could be recipes. Blogs could be comic strips. Blogs could be haiku. Blogs could be a ton of different things. Blogs could be guest blogs. So if that's a concern that you have, I have a whole blog about that. Now, if you feel like, yeah, I've got ideas for like one or two blogs, but I mean, to stay consistent with it, I don't know. That might be an issue of just generating a lot of ideas up front so you don't have to worry about the writer's block later. So I've also got a blog here on some tools, some different ways that you can overcome that writer's block and generate a bunch of blog ideas up front. So if you have either of those questions or concerns, you're going to want to check those resources out. Now, I have thrown a lot at you, and I want to give you a moment here to ask questions about those first topics that we've addressed before we move forward. So if you have questions about general strategy or websites or blogs that you want to tackle now before we move on, this is a great time. Put your questions in the chat and we can tackle those. So Hal and Lisa jump in straight away. How often should a website or a blog be updated to stay fresh? So this is going to sound like an unuseful general answer, but I am serious when I say it. Realism is important here. So I want you to think about what you can do consistently. So sometimes if I'm working with somebody directly, they'll say, oh, I could probably do like a weekly blog. And I'll say, that's great. Do you think you could still be doing weekly blogs 3 years from now, never having missed one? If the answer is yes, great. That's what you want. If the answer is, oh, I don't know, you're probably going to burn out at some point. So then I'll start saying, okay, how about once a month? Not that. How about once every 2 months? You start looking for what can be done consistently, and then you plan around that. Consistency is going to be important here, as much as you can do, but with consistency. So that would be the answer I'd aim for. If I give you a specific number, I'm not looking for you to burn out on it. So it really needs to come from what can be done. Now, Patty Summers is saying, what do you consider the optimum length of content for a narrative blog post? I mean, there's so many different formats that you can do. So like, I would say for some blogs that I've done, I'm always thinking like at least 1,000 words. Sometimes I've gone longer. But you might measure that very differently if you're doing video content or if you have a specific format like a comic strip or something. So you really want to think about what is the format intended to be. And again, if you hate all of those ideas, guest blogs can be a really interesting way to get it done too. So consider the many different paths you can go down. Kendra asked, is it easy to host your own website or pay someone to host your website? I am not a web developer, so technical questions on that, I want to throw it to Julie in the chat to let us know if there are any upcoming specifically like website webinars coming up where you can really look at the details of that. If not, going to having a conversation with your folks at the ASPTDC might be a good option to really get into the nitty gritty of the technical side of it. Let's see here. Trisha, can a social media feed or feeds be added to your website, replacing blogs? Do search engines see their content as SEO juice for the site? We're going to get into this a little bit in the next session. No. Social media, we don't own social media. That's some other company's business. So if you have a website and you want content and you want to know that it's staying there and you want to know that the terms aren't changing, you put it on your own website. But I answered that quickly, but I'm going to get into that a little bit more in our next section. So don't think that I'm glossing over it. We're going to come back to that. Let's see. I'm having a little bit of a hard time getting the chat to stay on the questions that I want to get them onto. Okay, Joan, how to get attention to the blog, draw new readers. And, when we talk about newsletters, I often actually like make sure my blog is sent out to anybody who's on a newsletter list, anybody who's on a social media. Like I'm using all of my tools to say, hey, new content, go to my website. So use all the channels you currently have and make sure that on the back end of your blog, you're making it really clear what it's about. So search engines can help you do that too. So those are a couple things that I would say up front with that. Great questions, and some of them really tee up our next section. So let's look at social media. Again, if you still have questions on these first areas that we talked about, but they didn't get addressed, we have more times to ask questions. So you will get a chance to address those again. But let's look a little bit at social media. I'm going to spend a bit more time on this topic only because it felt like a good place to put some of the things about brand. But a lot of the ideas that I present here can be applied to the other tools as well. So social media, what can it do for your business? Well, first of all, it can convey the personality of your business, that brand piece. It can sell without selling. We'll talk about that a bit. It can establish social proof and community. So you can already see how it's dovetailing into all of those objectives. It's also really valuable in driving traffic where you want it to go, getting people to go to the next place. And of course, generating leads is something we would like to be able to do from here as well. So let's talk showcasing personality first. Social media, especially because it generally requires a volume of content and a very just a frantic pace of putting content out there, really requires us to think about who we are and what we're trying to say and how we're trying to say it. So it can be an interesting way to start doing your own litmus test of what is my brand? Who am I and how do I talk to people as a business? So showcasing personality is something that we often run up against even quicker with social media than we would with something like a blog, but it's the same concept for something like a blog, for something like newsletters. Showcasing personality is important because it's part of how you're saying this is who this business is and how we do business and how we're going to treat you. as a consumer. And this is a way that you can set yourself apart from your competitors as well. So we have a couple of tools around brand that I want you to consider when you're thinking about content for this or any of the other tools. The first one is values. And values sounds like such an obvious thing to say. A lot of times people are like, oh, what's the values of my business? And they make up a couple words. Maybe they throw them on the about page of their website and then they sort of walk away from them. But that's not what values are. Values are how you're going to show up in your business every single time you're interacting with a customer. Values are how your whole team is going to show up when they're interacting with a customer. So the customer has to be able to look at what you're saying about your values and know that this is the experience that will be delivered to them when they work with your company. It's the guiding principles of how your business operates. So you can see this graphic with some examples of values words. There are many out there to consider, but this is really saying, how do we do business? What should the customer expect? And that should show up not only in how you treat them when you're working with them, but also in all of your content. Because the content, the way that you're putting your content out there is sort of a promise of what the experience of working with you is going to be. So just a couple things to think about here. I wanted to use some examples that are going to be very different from each other so you can start to get a sense of what this looks like. So I pulled an example from Rolls-Royce. I always love looking for Rolls-Royce marketing because they're not marketing to me. I'll tell you that much. But they do the most amazing marketing, and you have to go find it if you want it. So there's always some hidden nuggets there. So here's a Facebook post that they've done. It says, the finest cuisine is presented in the grandest of settings, adding the finishing touch to every Rolls-Royce experience. I mean, talk about just like perfect finalized marketing copy. And then you've got these 3 images that all have a certain feel to them. Now, for me, when I look at this, I'm thinking of words like luxury, prestige. That's something that I might have brought into, those are words that I might have brought into looking at this post, but they're also words that I'm taking out of this post. And so I'm going to be looking for all of the marketing from Rolls-Royce to match those words for me. Now, if you had other words you were thinking, those are the words that you associate with this brand. You're looking for that to match up in what you're looking at right now and to match up in the future with their next marketing. So those would be some words that I might use as an example, but let's look at something a little bit different. Let's look at something like the Catholic Company. So here, there's actually a lot of technical things I like about this post. They say, good morning, read today's hashtag morning offering email. They give you a link to read the morning offering email. And then they give you a graphic. It takes a few seconds to read this. It's got that morning offering in it. And a word that comes to mind is actually a word that's even in this content, and it's faith. And you get to decide what word strikes you, right? So now whatever words we all have in our heads, we are going to be expecting this company to continue to uphold that value in their future marketing. And we're going to expect the same experience if we go to their website, if we talk to somebody from customer service. These are some of the things that we're going to be looking for. So values really help set your business apart in terms of how you do business. Tone is a cousin to values, but is a little different. And it's also another reason why people might come find you. Now, this is the style of communication that you have with the audience. This is how your voice sounds. And that could be written voice, that could be your actual voice, it can be just the language that you use. Tone is how people feel when they're hearing what you have to say. So I've got this graphic here with some examples of tone words, but there's so many to choose from. And even some, like, right at the top left there, I have the word humor. There are so many shades of humor, so many ways humor can be delivered. So what gets really interesting is if you have multiple different tone words and then you don't know how they connect, but yet you're going to find a way, and that's going to be the tone of your business. Like romantic humor. Okay, what would that sound like? This is, the tone of your marketing ultimately needs to match the tone of how your team, your business communicates with the customers. Even when you're at the point of sale or you're delivering a product or service. So tone needs to remain consistent because, again, it's sort of a promise. This is how we're going to be. when we talk with you. But tone can create immense loyalty in your customer base. And, think about people that you follow just because you like to hear how they talk. If you're looking for information on a certain topic, who do you go to? Do you listen to your mother? Do you listen to a late night talk show host? Is there a newspaper columnist you really like? Is there an author you really like to read? They're speaking to you in a certain voice, and you almost become addicted to that voice. So think about how you can harness that for your own business. Now, a couple of examples that'll show you just wildly different tones. Here we've got a post from NASA. Once launched on Monday, NASA's Transiting Exoplanet Survey satellite tests will collect 27 gigabytes of data per day. So you can see this is very fact-based, but facts can be delivered in a lot of different ways. Think about how you might deliver this if it was for kids. NASA has given you just the facts. And if you're interested in that, you're going to keep going to NASA for delivery like that. Now, here's a wildly different tone. Old Spice. Being manly isn't about not showing emotion or being super tough. It's about watching branded live streams that teach you lessons on modern masculinity. To me, when I think of Old Spice, I think of like almost not quite a farce, but they're very over the top in their humor. They go way out there, but you either love that or you hate that, and they're banking on the idea that enough people will love it that's their consumer pool, that's their leads. So just think about tone and how, there might be companies that you follow just because you really like the way they talk to you. Be that for somebody else. Now, all of this ties into a concept known as selling without selling. And the social media section is a good place to put this, but this might apply to other aspects of your marketing as well. Even something like a networking event, you could think about selling without selling. It's this idea that sometimes people don't want you to come in hot with like the buy this now, get this on a discount. Sometimes they just need a conversation. Sometimes they just need to, for you to give them something to be interested in, or, they're looking to procrastinate, or they're looking for information, but they're not looking to buy right away. We need to sort of feed into the slower pace of selling sometimes. And social media is absolutely a place where that is the case. So if you've ever has anybody here, feel free to put in the chat, have you ever had the experience of following a company or visiting a company page and just seeing one sales post after another? And then if you engage with them at all, they send you a message and they're like, oh, do you want to buy my stuff? Have you ever had that experience? And as a consumer, what does that feel like? So I'm curious to see if anybody's had that. If you've had that experience, feel free to jump in the chat. Lula D or Lulad is saying, yes, it's horrible. Okay, so John is saying pressure. Julie's saying, yes, awful. I mean, it doesn't have to be a trend that we make here, but goodness, we're getting one. Katrina, yes, it's annoying. Think about that. We're business owners. I know, we're trying to sell stuff. Jessica says, no, thank you. Think how counterintuitive that is. We have to really rein it back certain places where we're marketing to say, oh, it's not, you don't want to drive your audience away from you. You're trying to bring them towards you. You want them listening to you. So this idea of selling without selling is saying, how can I create a conversation with you? How can I put information up that you want to read or hear and get you hovering around my business until the right moment when I can sell something? It's not about selling all the time. It's about selling sparingly, but communicating all the time. So this is something that is extremely relevant on social media. And there might be other tools where you can be a little more direct about your sales approach. Social media, people didn't necessarily go there with the wallet in their hands. So you have to consider that. Now, another element that we can build into, it's not all about just saying, here's what my brand is. You can also use this as a tool to share the social proof element, the reputation element of your business, and to start building community around your business. So let's look at that. What can social proof look like? Social proof being the reputational component. If other people trust your business, surely this consumer should trust your business too, right? So this is about showing, hey, other people think I'm cool. I'm validated by others. Maybe you should validate me as well. So With this, it's about saying, what are the feathers in the cap of my business that we can really use here? So you might talk about things like number of staff, number of years in business, showing sort of how robust your business is, number of clients. It could be something on social media, it's very public: followers, visitors, engagement stats, community projects. This is a way that we're really part of the community. Have you won any awards? What type or how many? Speaking gigs, published content. This is saying some third party thought I was worth, sharing my voice. So you should too. Supporting a charity, kind of like community projects. This is just showing, the how deeply you're networked. Testimonials and referrals, that's one we often think about first, but as you can see, there's so many others. Community partners, who else are we collaborating with? And you start to sort of link the reputation of those brands together. So these are all some things that you can start to tap into in your content here or on the other tools as well. And it just helps to sort of build people's understanding of, should I trust this company? And remember, they need that information if they're going to buy from you. Now, once you've done these things, where do they go next? You don't want people staying on social media forever, because that's not money in your pocket. So where do you get them to go from here? And it's about being really thoughtful with that. What pathways are you setting for them? Can you get them to a blog on your website, to some other page on your website? Can you get them to sign up for a newsletter or a lead magnet, something that puts them on your list? So think about where you can go from there, because that ultimately makes them a lead if they're now signing up for things. If they're connecting with you directly, that is now making them a lead. So how can you step forward with them, and how can you encourage them to do that? Now, I'm going to say one more thing about this that'll possibly rock your world. Is social media mandatory? Now, again, this is just my 2 cents. I would say, as much as social media can do like every objective that we talked about, here's the thing about social media. Social media takes a lot of time. If you're going to do social media right, it's about being social. It's about connecting with people. It's not just about the content you put out. And let me tell you, the content you put out should be consistent and regular and frequent. But also, it's about having conversations with people. And I know that there are a lot of business owners out there who do not have the time to do that. And so they don't. So social media, your platforms may end up looking like, oh, this person, are they even in business? They're not really communicating much anymore, or at all, or with anybody. Sometimes the inability to put frequent content and communication out through social media platforms, it's so public that it can make your business look worse instead of better if you're not able to keep up with the pace. So if you are one of those people who's saying, you know what, I can do like 1 post a month, and, I can schedule it, and that's all I've got. Maybe what you need is a blog on your website and a newsletter to let people know that it's out there. And maybe you need other ways to start meeting new people. Maybe you need to go to networking events that match the frequency of what you can actually do. So, social media can be great for all the reasons that I've talked about today. But if you're not actually prepared to use it, if you're not prepared to make the most of it, it might be serving you in a way that you don't want for your business. So I want you to consider that. Could be really good, but it's not for everybody, especially if you don't have the bandwidth to use it. So just something I want you to think about there. For some of you, that might have made you love me forever. For some of you, that might make you feel like, oh, she doesn't know what she's talking about. But, I'm thinking about resources, and I'm thinking about being practical. So if it's practical for you, great. If it's not, I want you to consider how you could potentially use some of these other tools to start gathering the network that you need. Having said all that, are there any questions that you want me to address? So this is a great time to put your questions into the chat. It can be about social media, but it could be maybe you thought of something that you wanted to ask about blogs or newsletters, or blogs or websites, or this general strategy as a whole. So questions on anything we've talked about to this point are totally fair game. And remember, we still have just a little bit still coming up on newsletters and lead magnets. But, a lot to think about so far. And remember, a lot of that stuff that I mentioned in the context of social media, stuff like, the values and the tone, that really does apply across so many of these different tools as well. So thinking about how you represent your business is an important factor to consider. So I'm filibustering here for a minute, just in case any questions come in. If you do have something that's sort of burning for you, and yep, there are some questions coming in now, feel free to ask them before we move forward, just to make sure we're kind of all still together here. Lula D or Lulad, I think it's Lula D. So sorry if it's not. So if I'm not a blogger or Facebooker, then would the drive be a store? Sure. I mean, a store is a physical location or an online location where you're putting product, but you want to make sure, I mean, if you consider new products being added or products almost like a blog, can you push those out through your channels, however you're communicating with your audience? Maybe you want to pay extra attention when we talk about newsletters. You can sort of drive people to those different tools, those different products that you're selling in your store. Maybe you can use that as a means of, really loading those with keywords. Or if we're talking about an online store, making sure people are finding their way to the right thing, or talking about how something's been made, or, adding information into a description that would really give people more to think about. Josh is saying, how do we find a happy medium between attracting leads and not being grandiose or disingenuous with our promise to potential customers? It's such a good question, Josh. And this is why I mentioned, like, a lot of people struggle with marketing versus being humble, not being arrogant. Finding that happy medium can start with, I want to thank you all for helping me have this achievement. I want to, I can't believe that this just happened, but you all were part of my process. Sometimes throwing the appreciation back to your audience or to specific people can be a really interesting way, for example, to talk about an accomplishment or a sale or a big client that you got. So think about it. It's all about slightly stretching your comfort zone at first. And you might find that the more you do that, the better off you are. A lot of times when you throw it back to your customers and appreciate them, you're going to get a really good response, and it makes us feel like we can do more and more. So I want you to think about that sort of intermediary step there. Telling your story is one way that you can, it's not just like, I just did this thing and you're just so proud of yourself. It's like, wow, I worked so hard. Let me tell you how hard I worked to make this thing happen. And that can be for a sale, that can be for an achievement, that could be, I was featured somewhere. So think about that as maybe a middle step to help you get there. Joan, let's see. A potential national audience for wall art and regional for photo shoots, best ways to reach both organically. Part of that is the communities that you're interacting within, so if there are other businesses that are reaching those audiences or other influencers that are reaching those audiences, how can you start showing up in conversations with them online? How can you start collaborating with them? I'm a big believer in partner marketing, and that's where the idea of community building is something you can be very proactive with. Let's see. Aaron, I'm looking to integrate ChatGPT in the future as a tool for my company. Do you think ChatGPT is becoming a popular tool for? It's definitely it is certainly the topic of choice right now, like AI in general, ChatGPT. I think I think it's really about deciding what the tone is that you're looking for. I've thought about, do I integrate it for my business? And I can't think of a way to integrate it for my business at the place that I'm at right now that feels right. Way back in my business, I had an assistant who said, we should put a chat box on this was like 5-6 years ago. She's like, we should put a chat box on your website so that people can get their questions answered at any time. And I said, no, because I don't want them to feel like they can get answers from me at any time of day. I set very specific boundaries when I work with clients, so I don't want my marketing to make me look like I'm accessible all the time. So it's sometimes about really thinking about what are the right value systems you want to put out for your business, what tools work with it, and AI. My goodness, I don't know, Julie. If you have any specific AI focused presentations coming up, please put that in the chat, because I imagine a lot of people have questions like that right now. Such interesting questions. I do want to just make sure we have enough time to talk newsletters and lead magnets. So I'm going to jump into that. Patty, you might want to put that question back in the chat towards the end as well. I just want to make sure we cover this piece. Newsletters. A number of you up front had guessed maybe newsletters was an element that I wouldn't think of as mandatory. I happen to love newsletters. So let's talk about that, my obsession with newsletters. Here's what newsletters can do. First of all, they can warm your audience. They can give you a more predictable reach. They can balance the value-driven content with some of the harder selling stuff that you may want to do. Also, they offer incredibly powerful analytics that can feed directly into your sales process. So let's talk a little bit about this idea of warming the audience. For some of you, you may have a business where your product or service has like an urgency to it. Like if you're a dentist, somebody has a toothache, they need a solution. So they're going to go through their vetting process very quickly. But for some people, for some of us, it takes a lot longer to warm an audience, or for people to be ready to buy from us. So this goes into that idea of the rule of 7. If you haven't heard of that, it's this sales principle that it takes at least 7 touches to turn a lead into a sale. They're basically, the number 7, any company might look at its data and they might say, okay, but really, if we bring the sales team in at the 13th touch, the idea here is saying it takes for many of us a lot more than one time of reaching somebody to make that dent, to build that trust, to warm that lead, to get them. If we put a call to action in front of them, how long is it going to take for them to actually do something about it? So you can look at it as the rule of 7. This is how many touches I need to have. But you can also consider that for some of your leads, it's about when is the situation right in their own lives. So sometimes it's the combination of those two things. And, how are you going to stay in front of them reliably if it takes a while? So I'll tell you, and I don't say this to scare you. I just say this as this is an example of how it's worked for me. I have a marketing tip of the week, a newsletter that goes out every Wednesday. And it has some information in it, and people will get on my newsletter list and they'll get these weekly updates from me. And I have absolutely had people who've said to me, hey, Melissa, I've been on your newsletter list for a year, 2 years, and I'm ready to work with you now. My record is I had a person who bought my services. Like they started doing a project with me 6 years after meeting me at a speaking event. And they stayed on my newsletter list that whole time in between. And by the time they were actually ready to work on their own marketing strategy, I was the only person still communicating with them that they had met at the time when they were doing all that initial information. And that may sound really daunting to you, like, wow, 6 years of weekly emails, that's a lot of touch points. But I was able to do that because a lot of people were receiving my weekly emails. This was one of those people, and it was keeping her warm until she was ready. So think about that. It's actually a pretty efficient tool if you can find the frequency of it that's realistic for you. Another thing to consider is that newsletters are a way to get comparatively better reach than you're going to get on a lot of other online marketing tools like social media, right? You put a post out on, I don't know, Facebook. You put a post on Facebook, what percentage of your audience really sees it? Probably very low, probably low single-digit percentages, right? With newsletters, a lot of times we're looking at like 20, 25% industry average open rates. And that's just people who opened it, not even people who saw your name come up in their inbox. And then, of the people who opened it, then it's like, okay, well, how long did they spend looking at that content? So chances are, pound for pound, you're going to get more reach or more reliable reach within your network with something like a newsletter. And I will say, for some of you, depending on the age of the audience you're trying to reach, you might sub in the word text marketing for this. Newsletters, email marketing, text marketing. It's still about, I've got their contact information and I'm getting in front of them. Now, this is also a place where you can potentially mix that value-driven content and the sales content. So if people feel like there's enough value in just opening your email, then can you also sell to them within that? For some people, it's all about, all of our newsletters are discount offers. But for a lot of us, there's a particular type of content. Maybe it's your blog content that's drawing people in. Oh, I want to see what the latest is. And then you can also say, by the way, you can buy this service or you can buy this product. So it's a place where it makes a lot of sense to have a sales message and a value message side by side. Now, here's maybe my favorite part. So like many other online marketing tools, you can use newsletters to track the performance of your content. So, if you put something on your website or if you do something on social media, you can usually see general stats like this is how many people saw it, or maybe a slight breakdown of like this is how many of them were men versus women, or this is where they were in the world when they looked at this. So a lot of tools give you general stats like that. But newsletters also tell you the behavior of specific subscribers. For most of the newsletter tools that you can use, you can actually see by name and email address who opened and who clicked. What would you do if you knew who was the absolute most interested in what you were putting out there? How would that change how you talk to them the next time you see them, if at all? How would that change, how you sell to them? I was recently looking at, I was thinking about, speaking prospects. And this is me pulling back the curtain. I was recently looking at a specific list that I have that I've been reaching out to monthly and thinking, okay, I am thinking about sending a gift to my a mailed gift to my most active clickers, people who are really opening every email and clicking on the emails. And maybe some of those people are like right at the edge of hiring me. Who knows? But I'd like to get in front of them. I don't have unlimited budget. So how can I be wise with it? Well, I looked to see who is opening my newsletters the most. And that is my next step with them. So think about what you could do with the information of, hey, these are people who are really listening to what I'm saying. So if you're wondering what you might do with that analytics, you can see how much of a nerd I am about newsletters and a little superhero in the corner. Uses for analytics. This is a fun one. I share some thoughts on what to do with the information and what information to look for with your newsletter analytics. So again, that link, like every other link, is going to be on the final link on the final slide. One more element that I want to look at here is this idea of lead magnets. And this is the puzzle piece almost everyone is missing, often because they don't even know what I'm talking about when I say the term lead magnet. Lead magnet, you could use the word, sometimes people say freebie, sometimes people say opt-ins. There's other words people might use for it, but it's this idea that if somebody is hovering around in your audience, but you give them something to sign up for, you now have their contact information where you could potentially reach them again and again in a more reliable way. For example, with newsletters. So it's gathering their contact information so you can connect with them again. Now, what can a lead magnet do for you? It can link your website and your newsletter. It can give leads a reason to opt in. It can help establish that value and build that trust. And there are just flat out more ways to market them. So looks like my font here pushed everything down. But this slide, it's all about looking at this as a link between your marketing and your sales process. Leads are anonymous when they visit your website. You have no idea who specifically is visiting your website until they take an action. Maybe they buy something. Maybe they send you an email. But give them options of the simplest things they can do to become part of your lead pool. So having them sign up for something, yeah, it could be that they sign up for your newsletter, but even that, it's like, okay, well, I don't know what's in this newsletter. So give them something that's really tangible. Give them a check. Here's a checklist that you can get, or an ebook. Here's a specific exercise that you can download. Here's a quiz that you can take. There's all different ways to get people to do something that's feels really short term, but then you're saying, hey, but then you can get access to my monthly marketing tips. And now they're also on your newsletter list. So when you think about the role that that plays, this is about saying marketing is I'm sending my message to many people, but I don't really know who they are. And I don't know how they're specifically responding. Now you're getting them into your sales process where you can start to have these one-to-one conversations. Something has to bridge that gap. And online, it tends to be a lead magnet. And there's also this idea that you can get leads to take these stepping stones, convert to something free, then convert to something paid, and then convert to something a little bigger that's paid. So it's asking them to take smaller jumps, and maybe you keep more of them with you along the way. A lead magnet is also a reason for an introduction. And it's not just saying, sign up for my newsletter list where you'll get lots of emails from me all the time. It's saying, no, if you take this quiz, you can learn exactly, X, Y, and Z. So you're giving them something with very specific, easy to communicate value where they can now sign up. But by doing that, you're giving them a chance to discover much longer term value, much longer term reward, and really discovering your business, and you're building that relationship longer term. One more thing I'll say about them is that lead magnets tend to be, if you can make them evergreen, something that like won't ever go out of date, you can find a lot of ways to stretch the marketing. So you can say, oh, we just had our 1,000th download. We just had a sign up from South Africa. We just, you can talk about all these different achievements. It's the 1-year anniversary of my lead magnet. Like there's a lot of different ways that you can talk about this piece of content that aren't just related to the content itself. So think about what you could use to bring people in and just really start getting people to hover around your business and identify themselves to you. I do want to make sure we save time for any final questions. So I'll just say, look, online marketing, like I said, it's a long-term strategy. And I hope that you're seeing that you create a bit of a web with all of these things. And how can you get people to keep bouncing around your business for as long as possible? When was the last time you went somewhere and somebody was like, I think I met you at a networking event in 2015, but I still have people who come up to me, or even approach me online and say, I was just reading this thing you wrote in 2015. The breadcrumbs you leave online can last for quite a while, and they can potentially grow over time. So if you do have questions, this is a great time to put them in the chat. You can address any of the things we talked about. So course strategy, websites, blogs, social media, newsletters, lead magnets. It is all fair game. As you get your questions in, reminder, there are a couple of sessions still to come. We've got one on March 20th about the SMART principles of marketing messaging. That's a lot more brand related. And then in May 2024, date not quite set yet, but look for one on profiting with partnership marketing. That's going to be a really fun one to look at collaborations and word of mouth and how you're really building all of that energy around your business and the community around your business. On the landing page that I'm about to share the link for, there are some additional resources, such as really the summary of the role of your online marketing tools, as well as I threw in one on compelling content for blogs and newsletters if you're really strapped for ideas on it. Plus, all of those blogs that I mentioned are also loaded onto this page. So if anybody who's on live wants to try to throw that bottom link into the chat, that would be amazing. And also the top link is how you would connect with the ASBTDC if you want to book a session and become a client. So I do want to throw it over to Julie before we take any questions, just to add any final comments on it.
Melissa, I just put, hold on just a minute. Let's say I am putting a link into the chat for the ASB TDC so that folks can see where they can view this recording, as well as we've got quite a great slate of Melissa's webinars on our resources page on the marketing link. So take the time, and when you have a few moments, and go online, and those that are pertinent to your business, or all of them, spend some time watching those. Great information, such great expertise in this subject. So we have that. And then also, if you need a consultation for your small business or small business idea, click that link, and there's a get a consultation button in the upper right-hand corner of each of our pages. We'd love to
Okay.
help you.
Ah, that's wonderful. Thank you
So
for that,
Joan,
Julie.
we've got a couple of questions. Joan says, my social posts need to reach beyond current friends, contacts, and family. Best first steps. Sorry. Like Facebook groups, paid ads, other options. Help, please.
So paid, I've got to tell you, paid ads, especially on a platform like Facebook, sure, you can put money into it, but does that mean that it's going to matter? Facebook will take your $5. Facebook will take your $10, but people who generally have successful advertising strategies on social media, specifically Facebook, are usually spending many, many hundreds of dollars a month. So, and have a very clear strategy of what they're trying to do. So I urge you to be thoughtful and to maybe talk with the ASBTDC about coming up with a proper strategy if you are really looking at like social media advertising. Because it's actually, it seems like you can spend just a little money, but does that make a dent? First things that I would probably do are, what communities can you start engaging in? Are there places where you're on social media where you can start using uh, hashtags to identify other people who are having a conversation related to the topic that you just put content out about? Can you put it in the signature of your email? Can you, like I'm looking for any way to use whatever tools I currently have to push a piece of content out there in a way that feels organic to the conversation. So those are some things that I would probably start doing up front. You might also look at starting to develop collaborations with other businesses, looking at like more like longer term partnerships, but asking each other, can we support each other's content? Because usually with algorithms, if you can start getting some comments on something, it'll start getting shown to more people. So if you're building in a community of people who's helping each other in that way, that might help you generate more organic traffic. So those are some ideas that I would look at to get you started. I want to go back to Patty Summers had asked a question. And I feel you, Patty. I'm becoming really jaded by what seems to be a proliferation of AI generated comments within social media feeds. Any comments about that? Sure are. Yeah, you're going to get a lot of that. My protocol for something like that is if it definitely looks like an AI generated the comment, I usually delete it because I just don't want it to look like I'm not monitoring my account. If it's a comment from a real person, whether it's positive or negative, I believe it's a possibility for you to do some PR, even if it's a negative comment. So if it's something that actually does feel relevant and like it's a real thing to your business, consider it an opportunity to communicate on behalf of your business and to generate more traffic. If it's AI generated, I usually delete it. And some platforms are just ferocious with the amount of that you get. Instagram is like, I think really, really significantly like it's so much of it. And it's just part of that space now. So
And
it's a great
backing up
question.
just a little bit, Hal and Lisa Bell ask, is there a specific technology one must have on their website to create a lead magnet? I may have missed that, but
Say that again.
is there a specific technology one must have on their website to create a lead magnet?
Yeah. So it depends on what your lead magnet is. So for example, if you went with something like a quiz, that's usually going to require, let's say, like a plugin on your website that does quizzes specifically. But if you, for example, have like I have an ebook So I uploaded the ebook as now this is like a really unsophisticated way of doing it, but it still gets it done. I uploaded the PDF file of the ebook onto my website as media. And then when somebody signs up, they get put onto a newsletter list and it triggers an automatic email that has the link for that ebook in it. So it was actually a way to sort of within my skill set to be able to deliver the information because I just deliver the link in an email. But usually there is going to require like a form that they have to fill out to give you their name and their email. And that has to trigger a response. So if that's something that you know how to do or that you have an easy plugin that you can use, that's great. And if not, it might be something worth talking to a developer about because let me tell you, having a lead magnet on my website made a huge difference, not a small difference. And having a pop-up for it made a difference too. And I know a lot of people are against it, but just some things to think about there. So it does matter what kind of a lead magnet you're doing. It just depends on, how much information you're trying to collect.
So let's see. Chris asked, how do you come up with the content itself? All of this seems good, but if you don't have a way with words, how do you write a newsletter, blog post, or social page post? Which I think you addressed earlier with some great content that you've created.
And it's a great question. And I would encourage you, first of all, I would encourage you to look at that one blog that I wrote about brainstorming techniques. But you might look at things like what are the most frequently asked questions your actual customers bring you? Or maybe record your next sales call, not to use it, but just to use it for yourself to say, what questions were coming up? What were the things that I was saying to sell this? All of that can be broken down into content. And again, it might be written, it might be video, it might be a poem. Like you can find all sorts of different ways to break content down. But sometimes the best way to generate more content is just to listen to the conversations you're happening in one day and see like, oh, actually, there's a dozen ideas for things people want to know more about right here. So I would probably start there first if you have any amount of an existing client base.
Okay. We've run over a little bit, which is great because we've had some super participation. I just want to say thank you again to Melissa. Once again, visit our resources page on our website and you can review this webinar. I'll have it up by this evening. And then also you can expect to get the link in your email to the PowerPoint deck. So I'd like to thank everybody for participating. And once again, thanks to Melissa for another great session and for your expertise in digital marketing and strategy.
Thank you all so much for being a part of this and stay warm, everybody.
Thanks. See you next time.